Everything that exists inside the man-made world is twisted, stolen, and perverted from the original blueprint, from what originally existed. Because there is only one creator. There's only one creation that came from that one creator. Whatever that is. Don't take it too far because you don't know. So it all comes from one thing, and then that was twisted and turned into something else by humans. We are the lesser, quote unquote, gods, goddesses. We are the lesser. So we didn't create this life from scratch. We borrowed it from somewhere else, and the reason I know is because you can trace it. So, for example, things like depression. Okay, we've pathologized depression. And I'm not saying and I always have to preface this because I always hear the haters in my voice or in my head. But the preface of this doesn't mean that it can't go too far and it does become a pathology. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you shouldn't use medicines of all types, whatever works, okay? That's the preface. But depression has been pathologized. That we live in a cycle of up and down energy, if you want to call it that. But it doesn't exist on a plane. So it's our best way of describing it. But the more we do call it up and down, the more it tends to be more extremes. But depression, for example, okay? Depression has been pathologized, and you should never be depressed. And this is what exists in our culture. What for? For production, for capitalism, to get most production out of us. That's why caffeine is legal. So we are told never to be depressed, even though the nature itself goes from a spring and summer into a fall and winter. And she has her cycles. And to equate a depressive energy, or even to call it depressive, is not entirely actual or factual. And I think that we've given it this negative connotation to be depressed. But what if we put it into like a depressive mode? What if we started calling it, it's more contained? What is that? Like, what all can it mean? What is that? How can that energy be described? In 1,000 ways. One I came up with is, no, Megan, it's not that you are pathologically depressed. We're not going to call it that. What if we looked at it like you are incubating? Because this is the cycle of our ancients that they taught us, right? Is that we go through these cycles and we die and return to the womb. And that's where the original idea comes from death. Death wasn't just the end. Death was the beginning of something new. It was going into the womb and coming out reborn. Our Celtic ancestors, the Western Europeans, this was, a part of their culture. And our native culture, from those of us who have Western European roots, mine are mixed, but I have both Native American roots and I have Western European roots. So I get to combine these two, and it's really cool and interesting. But, this is the cycles, the natural cycles that we go through, and death isn't the end. Death is a rebirth, and we go through these cycles all the time. Just because there is one final physical death doesn't mean that we don't go through these cycles of birth and death. And that is what it is. The opposite of birth isn't death. Or the opposite of death isn't life. The opposite of death is birth. So being depressed or going into a depressed state, maybe we could also think of it as like a womb state, an incubation state. There's a different energy here, and in that energy, we learn different things. We heal parts of us that are wounded, for one. To go into the depressed state, we can, but it doesn't necessarily have to be looked, even if you have wounded places. But if you don't, it's just a restorative time. It's a resting time. It's just a time for your body to restore, and for you to give your body what it needs to sustain itself through that time. And you learn a lot when you just be with it and don't try to escape it. And I think that that's kind of what makes it worse. Depression is when we try to escape it, and we call it a pathology. We call it something wrong with us, and we call it, I have an illness. That it makes it worse because we're trying to escape it instead of just being with it and letting it teach us and nourish it. Really, like, what does it need? What do you need in that state? Your body needs different kinds of nourishment when you're in that state. It's just different. So what does your body need? What kind of nourishment does it need physically? And how do you train your mind to think when you're in that state? And what do you think about? And how do you go about it? It's different. It's different than when you're in a non-depressed state, okay? You go, and so that's why it's different. Because, I mean, that's where the whole myth comes from, is you go below. So you go inside and you experience the energy of that and let it teach you and let it guide you, keeping in mind that there isn't anything inherently bad about you. And anytime you run into something that feels bad about yourself, you need to remember the rule, which is that this world and the man-made world, anything that it has created to be bad or has twisted or perverted comes from another source that was inherently good and meant to be in harmony. By good, I mean in harmony. Okay? And so when you come up against something that doesn't feel good, that you think, oh, I might be bad, go with it. Again, go into that depressed state, so to speak. Go underneath it all. Go deep. Go underground. Go back to the womb of it. Where did it originate? Where did it start? And start to understand it. And you can start to name what it was designed to do. Whatever that bad thing is about you, what was it originally designed to do that had been twisted and perverted? What's the good of it? And then you go from there and you work on transforming your mind to believe in that more than it believes in the twisted, perverted, misnamed application that the world has put on it. This oppressive entity, if you will. Okay? And that's how we heal. And that's how I know that we are inherently good. If good is defined by being in harmony with the planet that we were born on and following her harmonies and tuning into those harmonies and whatever harmonies she has, that is what good is. And us knowing who we are by looking through the places where there is pain and discovering where that pain came from and learning what the truth is, and remembering that it's only good underneath all of that, and not to be afraid to keep searching for it and understanding it, so that it can teach you and heal you so that you're free from it, that you're free from that worldly possession that it has over you. It's possessed you, but it doesn't have to. And we can live free of that and govern ourselves, even if it exists somewhere else outside of us, even if the potential of it exists, or it's still being given a home by others. It doesn't have to be given a home by us. You can choose to disengage with that. You can choose to leave it and exist free from it. It's not easy, but it can be done. And it helps to go out in nature where she supports that best. So, that's what I have to say today, and that's the basics of setting yourself free, truly. So, thanks for coming to my MaegTalk. See you later.